This is my best kind of show notes because we didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Oh, like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is it not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Brandon is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is agape. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you! You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're
how
insane.
Did I do that?
You're insane.
I am insane. I'm insane. I don't even want to move the laptop. I'm in the parking lot near Styles across the street from the Starbucks. I was trying to see if I could get Wi-Fi. I got no Wi-Fi. The whole of Post Road is, it is an absolute shit show. It's a shit show. I got to show you what I mean. This is my road driving to try and find a solution so that I could do the show today. That's the good one. That's also a good one. This is a tree that has fallen over and is leaning on the power lines, which is why I have no power. And I drove underneath the damn thing. I drove underneath the thing so that I could do a show for you today. So that I don't even know if this is live. I think it is. I see a whole bunch of people that are on. Oh my God, there's cop cars. The last time I did this, and the wind's picking up again really badly. The last time I did this was when I went to get my test. So, I don't really know how to handle this or what I should do. But I'm just gonna keep going on, man. And just see what happens. Because it's chocolate chip cookie day. So grab a chocolate chip cookie. I don't even have a cocktail because I'm driving and I just forgot my cocktail at home. Yep, so Nick Johnson is going to be my guest. I'm going to bring him on shortly. So hang in there, Nick. And tomorrow, if all things go well and I have power back, we'll have Scott Rouse followed by Ross Bernstein and Mark Masters. So very quick shout out to all the birthday boys and girls on Facebook and the same on LinkedIn. Hope you guys are well. Hope you are doing well. Hope you aren't going through the same thing that I'm going through right now. I will try and move the camera at some point. I just don't want to lose the connection or the battery. So it's a little crazy out there. Should I see if I can actually deliver a seated soliloquy? Why not? I'm, worried a tree might fall on me. But I'm gonna go ahead and do that because today's seated soliloquy is called Preparing for the Storm. I deliver this soliloquy to you sitting across the parking lot from a Starbucks, having somewhat evaded Storm Isaias's path. The Northeast and certainly Fairfield County has been under a tornado watch today. We actually had to go into the basement as we braced for winds in excess of 30 miles per hour. Now, if you think about it, it's the perfect analogy for what we're all currently living through during the life and times of COVID, racial unrest, the battle against police brutality, a very uncertain and unstable US election in November, and of course, murder hornets. These days, I'm not really surprised anymore by anything. My reaction is always the same. I shrug my shoulders and say something to the effect of, well, of course, it's 2020. What else did you expect? To use the storm analogy, COVID is one of those slow-moving storms that just stalls on you and piles on layer after layer of hurt. And like a storm, we're hunkering down and doing our best to wait it out. Well, at least some of us are. Others are running around without masks. That doesn't mean we have to be sitting ducks. It doesn't mean we have to be victims. It doesn't mean we need to be sitting on our hands waiting for something to happen. We can make something happen, especially when we're prepared. And that's the key here, preparation, planning ahead, planning for contingencies, planning for every imaginable twist, turn, and surprise, both good and bad. That's the key to riding out the storm of change, volatility, disruption, disintermediation, or whatever puts you and your business under conditions of uncertainty, duress, and discomfort. Planning for a rainy day might have been the norm once, but these days we need to plan and be prepared for ark-like conditions. These days, truth is stranger than fiction. And if you don't believe me, then I would just remind you that the phrase demon sperm was trending on Twitter, at least until today, when I think Yosemite has started to trend on Twitter. To quote Kim Wilde, remember Kim Wilde? My life is so full of surprises, nothing surprises me anymore. And with that said, we're still online, I think. It's time to bring on the birthday boy himself. I wonder what surprises him. Mr. Nick Johnson, happy birthday.
Thank you, Joseph. I do appreciate your weathering everything to make this all happen from the Starbucks parking lot. It's quite impressive.
It's crazy. I mean, how could I miss the birthday boy? I couldn't. I wouldn't. So I'm running this from my laptop. As long as the battery is going, I will be going. Hey, I've got a birthday gift for you.
Yes.
Small one.
Okay.
So I've decided the first official sponsorship of Corona TV is going to go to your brother. So if you look, if I did this correctly on the top right, Dandy Wine and Spirits. Today's episode is brought to you by Dandy Wine and Spirits, and that, of course, is your brother's store, right?
That is, yeah. So my brother owns a wine store right by the Domino the Domino Park in Brooklyn. It's been open for about a year, and fortunately, booze is an essential business in New York, so they've been able to stay open and prosper in these challenging times. And it's a really cool, nice, eclectic store with really great people that really know their stuff.
So let's see who's here wishing you happy birthday. There's Steve Garfield. There's TD himself. There's Leslie Laredo. Tom says the power is out on Long Island. And what is Joey Dumont saying? I think he's saying this is car Corona TV, or it's Corona car, or maybe it's Corona tornado. Steve says, if this works, this is great. Reminds me of the early days of online live video. Well, I'm still alive, but I may not be. And of course, Joey says, what does Joey say? He says, happy birthday. Good to see you. So yeah, everybody's out in full force, or in full force, to say happy birthday to you. So Nick, let's learn a little bit about you, if we may. First of all, a little thing called fun fact, right? And the fun fact about you is you were apparently, I didn't know this about you, one of the first legal bungees, one of the first legal bungee jumps. Is that's true, right?
Yeah, so this is true. In 1991, when I was an assistant network buyer at McCann Erickson, on a Friday, USA Today wrote an article on the fact that the first legal bungee jumping operation was opening in southern New Jersey the next day. And my girlfriend at the time, wife now, and I drove down at 5 a.m. that following Saturday to participate with this company called Adrenaline Adventures, which was hot air balloon bungee jumping. And I was number 2 to go. I actually have a picture of it. And I was interviewed for a newspaper after the balloon was lowered. So that was quite memorable and a good time. And considering I was making like $12,000, it was quite an investment at the time.
So wait a second. You mean this is not the picture? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I'm suggesting that this may be fake news right here, potentially.
Yeah, well, we're going to be talking, I guess, about fake news. But I mean, that must have been crazy. And out of a hot air balloon, what could have gone wrong?
A lot could have gone wrong. I would say that the most scary part was not leaving, not jumping off the balloon. The scariest part was stepping out of the basket onto a platform not much bigger than your foot and balancing on that and then preparing to leap off. But it was pretty awesome, I have to say.
So is there an analogy or I was drawing the analogy in my seated soliloquy about the storm and seriously the storm that we're living in as well with COVID, with disruption of business models and disintermediation, with a changing taste of consumers and media. Is there an analogy you can draw with respect to whether it's fear, whether it's courage, jumping out of a hot air balloon and being one of the first and setting that precedent?
Well, I think to try to run with your analogy here a little bit, I do think we are living in unprecedented times. You know, you and I have known each other for a long time, and certainly we've been through a lot in our industry, multiple recessions, 9/11. There have been a lot of difficult times. I don't think there's been anything that is as uncertain and transformational as what we're all living through here as it relates to our personal lives, our professional lives, and everything happening societally. It is interesting to go to work every day and try to figure out what the next week looks like and how to build strategies for the next quarter and the remainder of the year and moving forward, because there is so much uncertainty with what we're living through right now. I would say, you know, when this thing all hit and we started planning for the rest of the year, we probably all created scenarios of how this thing would sort of resolve itself. And 4 or 5 months in, you know, we're on very uneven footing as it relates to how our country will recover from the pandemic and all the ripple effects that are originating from it.
And I want to get back to that in a moment, but you know, Tom says life takes risk and courage, and he's certainly a man that knows all about risk and courage and bravery. And he may have to tell his own story on Corona TV at one point. But Benjamin Baker Haynes said, "Happy birthday, boss man."
That's my guy Baker. Yep.
And you know, and Steven's rubbing it in, saying sunny, 72 and sunny in LA. Yeah, it's pretty bad here. It's pretty bad here today.
It's not good. No,
Let's talk a little bit about what?
No, I was saying it's not good here. I think we'd both prefer to be in LA right now.
You're telling me. So the connection gets a little bit weird from time to time. So I'm just going to keep going, and people that are commenting, let me know if everything is good or if things aren't good. I suppose if things aren't good, I wouldn't know. But you know, I wanted to talk about something that is near and dear to your heart, Nick, and that is, you know, I mean, something I know you want to talk about too, and that is journalism, and you know, not just journalism, but I think the importance of local journalism. So there really are 2 points to this, right? I mean, one of the things that I've been saying lately is that I almost feel like we need to get back to the days of newspapers. And what I mean by that is as follows. You know, in South Africa, we had 2 newspapers. We had the Cape Times and we had the Cape Argus. The Cape Times was in the morning and the Argus was in the evening. And you pretty much got your news in the morning and in the evening. And maybe you listened to the radio at some point during the day and picked up something in the middle. And then, of course, there was television. And generally, you didn't get news in the morning on TV. But there would be kind of news at about 5 or 6, and then there'd be a late night news broadcast. And the thing, living in this 24/7, always on, you know, just it is as bad as it's ever been, if not worse, where we actually use the phrase fake news, and we shouldn't even dignify the fact that journalism, you know, is anything but, you know, but it has a spine and backbone. And listen, you live in this world. You came from the television business. You've worked at CNN. You've worked at Turner. You've worked at NBC Universal. You've seen the world change. And now here you are working for essentially a local newspaper. So I would love for you to talk about not just about how things have changed, but why now? Why is it so important right now to stand up for journalism, and in particular local journalism?
Well, so let me take 2 bites at answering that. And so, the first question is, why did you do this in the first place? And with 3 children from 23 to 17 years old who were very smart, I really wanted to make sure I recognized that they were valuing news and information. And I think that I didn't want them growing up in an environment where the only source of news was through a social feed. And that was part one of why, when I was recruited into this job, I took it. The second reason I took the job was that Craig Foreman, our CEO, offered me the opportunity to come in and really try to transform a legacy print company into a forward-facing digital company. And that was 2 years ago. And so, for those 2 reasons, my kids and the importance of journalism and then the career opportunity were both very big draws for me. What's happened now, though, is that the pandemic, while it's a huge story told by many people very well, it's also a uniquely local story. When the World Health Organization said this was a pandemic, the whole country shut down. So that was a big, big story. But recovery and the infection rate in certain markets they're all different. It was a very, very fluid situation, and as a result, people in these markets have begun turning back to their local newspapers in a way that they haven't done it in many, many years. In fact, there's generations of people that are turning to their local newspapers that never have before, because we live in an environment that's oversaturated by news. But the story of the pandemic, the story of social injustice, are stories told very differently at the local market level. Recovery looks different in Miami from New Jersey to Kansas City. And we're seeing that as people turn to these local newspapers again, they're younger, they're spending more time, they're subscribing more, and their consumption is through the roof. And that's a really, really good thing. Yet there is an inverse correlation between that consumption and advertising. And while the consumer is incredibly engaged with this platform, the advertising market has not necessarily followed. And what I'm seeing now is the sensibility with major national advertisers, in addition to our bread and butter, small, mid-sized businesses in the markets, who are beginning to recognize that this is a place where they want to invest more time and money. And that ranges from financial services to technology to big box retail to CPG and others. And so that's a whole series of things, but it really starts with the fact that the COVID-19 story is a story that affects people in their backyards and their homes, their health, their return to school, their stimulus checks, recovery, restaurant reopening, everything else. There's not a lot of places you can turn to get that news and information, and that has reinforced, I think, the value of our brands in our markets. Joseph quietly buffering. He might have moved. He's frozen in time. Waiting for him to come back. Might be gone. Are you guys hearing me? Him? Anyone? I'm thinking you guys can hear me. TD, if you're out there, give me a thumbs up or something if we're still going. Okay, we're still going. I'd love to field some questions from the audience. I'm glad Chip can hear me. This is kind of weird. I like Paul Morgan acknowledging bald men ruling. And Joseph is frozen. So let's give him a couple seconds. I don't have the visibility into, oh, here he comes. Hey, I've been stretching, as they say in television.
Hey, bud.
Hey.
I drove forward, then I drove, then a few sirens came by, and could you repeat everything you just said after the first word? Well,
I think I will save everybody from that pain.
You know, you know, two things happened. One, it made me think of my cousin Vinny, which is when Mr. Gambino, I think his name was Gambino, he wakes up and he goes, "What that guy just said was bullshit. Thank you." And then the judge says the jury will disregard everything from Mr. Gambini, not Gambino, that Mr. Gambini said, except for the words "thank you." The other thing is, as you were talking and you were breaking up into Cylonyville, just every time when I heard 4 or 5 words from you in a row, it was beautiful. And it just makes me appreciate your voice. And I don't even know if people can hear.
Maybe that's how I'm best heard. I think they can hear us. I think I've been checking in with our audience that's chatting. I'm just glad you didn't tell me your biological clock was ticking. I was worried that's where you were going with my cousin Vinny. So thank you.
So I did hear a bit of it. And I think, you know, one of the things, I had a guest on by the name of Andrew Davis. And one of his things that he spoke about, which I thought was very profound, is this idea of ask a question that Google can't answer, or ultimately answer the question that Google can't answer. And I think one of the things that Google cannot answer is the power of local, is the power that at the end of the day, you know, what we remember, we always heard these ideas like, you know, think global, act local, and all these comparisons between big and top down and then bottom up. And I think now, for example, just seeing this absolute chaos around me right now, the wind blowing, the trees falling, sirens, I don't care about anything right now except, you know, are the people around me safe? When is my power coming back? Is there a safe route, etc.? I think there's never been a role right now and a need for grassroots, rock face, local everything to bubble up. And we've seen this, Nick, right? Like in the form of like Nextdoor and some of these companies that are demonstrating the power of micro and grassroots, right?
For sure. And what's interesting is you know, we all acknowledge we live in this massive country, but in general, you would feel as though we generally share many of the same sensibilities. And, you know, when the pandemic hit, our experience here on the East Coast was very unique to us because of how profoundly impactful the epicenter was in New York and then Connecticut and New Jersey. And yet now the epicenter has shifted into the Sun Belt, right? Into California, the Carolinas, Miami. And in some weird way, we're detached from all the pain that we went through, even though these markets are now going through it again, as well as recovery, as well as jobs, as well as the viability of these local businesses. And I do think that it really speaks to the humanity of our country and how united but separate we really, really are. And what I think is really unusual, particularly from a marketing perspective, is I don't think you can peanut butter a marketing message across our country right now the way that you might have been able to do so 6 months ago. And so if you're a brand that wants to squeeze as much value out of the rest of their fiscal year, you may have to market. Big box retail may need to message totally differently in pockets of the country in ways that are much more profound and significant than they've had to before. You know, you've talked about a Home Depot advertising in inclement weather. This is much more significant, and the sensibilities of the people that you're communicating to are very different. My receptivity to a message in New Jersey right now around a QSR, if I was to go to one, or a big store, is very different probably than what's happening in Miami or in Texas right now.
I also think, you know, I mean, obviously you know, my message with my book Built to Suck is at the end of the corporate era, you know, is upon us. That size is no longer a growth enabler, but a growth inhibitor. And when we think about the world that you and I came from, the media world, it was still the world where you could take one 30-second spot and reach 65% of US households on a Thursday night during, whether it was Cheers or MASH or you know, Friends or ER or Seinfeld. And now, and the opposite, local was never, I mean, the word, I know sometimes that people have an aversion to the word, but local was never sexy. Local never had the ability to get you sent to Cannes and win a Grand Prix. But I think right now, when we're all in survival mode, who gives a damn about rosé on the French Riviera, right? Now it's about survival stakes, making a difference, utility. And I think clearly that has to be the primary role and benefit of local right now versus the one size fits all.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's where, I said this to you jokingly as we caught up earlier, is that, in some ways, 2020 is the biggest marketing campaign for local ever. And, you say that tongue in cheek, and it's sort of a horrible thing to say, but it's also very true in that people are recognizing that you need a distinct message into these markets, and that even if you're a major national brand, your relationship with people where they live is an important one. And there are many people that have obviously recognized this, but I think that, to your point, the fact that it's going to be very hard to message homogeneously to our country in an environment where there will be such great discrepancies between, the financial well-being and the health, and even obviously the political lines are becoming more and more apparent every single day in terms of how people are treating and responding to the reality of this pandemic. So, I think that's sort of the big media piece, which is, I spend a bit of my time trying to talk to major national agencies about really the importance of news, because news is another hour-long topic in and of itself, but the importance of local news, particularly in today's environment. And then, the other part of the job that's really interesting is that in a time of huge disruption, as it turns to budgets and everything out, the playbook that you wrote in, November or October of last year is out the window. Is how do you lean into everything going on? And we already know that this level of disruption and pain will only accelerate certain inevitabilities. So how do you use this time to get ahead of organizational change and change management, so that you're really well positioning yourself for whatever the future holds? And so we think about that quite a bit.
So we can get into that and talk a little bit about it, but I do want to ask you one more question to kind of close the chapter on local, which is and it's obviously it's a direct question. It's a hardball and a softball question at the same time, and then we'll get into this idea of this new playbook, which is does local survive? How does local survive? And what I mean by that is not just yes, no, but what is the business model that ultimately is going to come into play? Because when we look at the basic model, there's circulation, there's advertiser, endorsed or subsidized content. Could there be a third model, like a tip jar, like a Patreon, like a GoFundMe, where enough citizens rise up and they say, we need you now more than ever, and without you there is a massive void and a chasm, and we will never be the same again?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to answer that question. The one thing I will say is that McClatchey in our markets was, and I think a number of other organizations were as well, were very proactive in terms of outreach to consumers, with that notion of a tip jar or individual contribution to the masthead. And those were very, very, very helpful, and I would say successful. I think ultimately, our mission is to provide as much value as we can to the consumer so that they continue to subscribe to us and see value in that relationship. And then to make sure that we're being as thoughtful as possible to bring great advertising experiences to them in a way that is contemporary and not intrusive. Like every other medium, this one is facing an increasingly more digital future. Obviously, that's maybe the most obvious thing I've ever said in my entire life. But at the same time, you still have to load balance the traditional side of the business, because it still does contribute revenue to the bottom line as you start envisioning a future that is more and more digitally oriented. So we think about that every day. We think about it in the newsroom. We think about it from a product perspective. Obviously, we think about it from an advertising perspective. What we're learning, though, I think, is that there are certain parts of our business that are doing really, really well, despite remote learning. I mean, like everybody else, overnight we had to take a very team-oriented group and start distributing them, working from home and figuring out how to manage them. That made us a lot better at Salesforce management, pipeline management, KPIs, and finding ways to manage remotely, but hold people accountable when all of a sudden they're at home with nobody around them. And I think the one gap I'm trying to really wrestle with is, how do you replace serendipity? I've always been someone, for 20 something years, I was on a 6:15 train into Manhattan every day, so I could take somebody to breakfast at 7:30 in the morning. To have that serendipity, how is work? What do you like? Is your career path working? What do you hate about your job? What do you love about your job? Like all that, that's all gone. And so, I'd say over the last 2 months, I've been trying to do a lot more team level leadership meetings to try to replicate that conversation. But there's a lot that happens over lunch when you have that one-on-one time. A lot of great stuff happens running out to grab a coffee or sitting on the elevator, and that piece, I think, is going to be the hardest part to replicate. I think we've learned that people work really, really hard, whether they're in their office or not, and that when we return from this, we're going to have to figure out a balance of the two and meet somewhere in the middle. I don't know that we'll ever be in an environment where we insist people be in the office 5 days a week just to be in the office. I mean, you're a commuter when you commute. I'm a commuter as well. That's 2.5 to 3 hours a day.
I'm commuting right now.
Yes. But that was a 3-hour commitment every day that was very unsatisfactory and just part of the grind of the job. So there's 3 hours back. I can do different things and be more productive.
There is I was and I've mentioned this on Corona TV before. I was listening to Seth Meyers' interview on Howard Stern, and they were talking about working from home and remote. And it was actually quite a magic thing that Seth said, because he said, for sure, there are efficiencies from doing this at home. And everybody's figuring out how much, saving the commute and being able to do things efficiently at home. But he said it's the inefficiencies, the friction of work that actually I miss, and that created this beautiful counterbalance. And that's exactly the point that you made. It's the actual flaws, because that's really what it is. I mean, you talk about serendipity. I talk about flaws. And that's why when you said, when I'd asked you, what do you want to talk about? And you said the loss of serendipity, I thought, I wonder what he means by that. I just think really what it is, it's the loss of flaws, including, but not limited to, missing your train and then bumping into an old friend and having a beer with them, a real Corona cocktail,
right?
At Penn or Grand Central, right?
Yep. Yeah. And it is those moments of frustration or banging your head against the wall or having come out of a really bad meeting and venting that creates the stimulus that drives you forward to do something a little bit different. And that part is very, very sterile. It's hard, when I have a team meeting every Monday morning, but it's still 12 or 15 people on a Zoom, and, the ability to respond or the ability to just grab you on your way out of that meeting and say, I really hated what you said there. You could have said it differently. Those moments are gone because we are sort of oversubscribed, because it's easy to grab time on a calendar, because you're not, when I was at NBC, there could be 3 people lined up outside my door trying to grab me, in the 15 minutes I had between running to 30 Rock or whatever meetings I had. And so, but that was different than sort of this sterile 15-minute blocks of Zooms geared towards driving to an outcome. So, that's the part I miss. And I think I could see in the future sort of a hybridized, few days in the office, few days just doing your thing, being productive. Obviously, as a sales guy, you want to be in front of people as much as possible. So we'll have to sort that out. But I think once we get onto a little bit more of a stable road to recovery, we'll really start thinking about how we want to handle things. I think right now there's definitely a sentiment of I mean, Google just did it, right? We're going to kick this can down the curb for another 12 months, and you guys can come back in 12 months and we'll sort it out. Now, being at Google's a high-class problem, obviously, so they're worried about different things than we are at McClatchey. But we've got to figure out what the future state looks like for us, and this is a great environment to really think about that.
Just a couple of let's see if I can bring these onto the show. There's like a little bit of a delay.
Nope, there's probably a full delay there. I think we lost Joseph again. We'll give him a minute to come back. Oh, here he is.
See, I brought Paco on just to say happy birthday, boss. and then I lost, and then I lost it. So anyway, look, this has been, if anything, this has been something different, right, Mr. Johnson? And then I'll just read them to you so that I don't lose them again. Scott Carr said, glad I got a chance to listen in. Great stuff. Happy birthday, NJ. And then let's see who else. I really want to continue talking to you, but this has been, I feel like this is very out of body for me at the moment, Nick. Just I mean, just seeing all this devastation around.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so I want to get back to, and I'll just keep flashing some of the comments as well. Well, thanks so much, Chip. I was actually driving at one point while Nick and I were talking before we started the show. He's like, what the hell are you doing? He could just see the clouds moving, etc. But there are a few comments from the others, and I'll just try and bring them on as we keep talking. Nick, if we take your two topics first, right? We talk about local versus global, right? Or local versus national. We think about newspapers versus digital. We think about online versus offline. We think about in the office versus remote as well. There's all this ability. I mean, the popular belief. Can you hear that, by the way? The fire engine.
They're coming for you.
There's always this popular belief that I'm telling you that the pendulum always swings back, and we end up somewhere in the middle. So, I know the third topic that you wanted to chat about is this idea of specifically remote leadership and the new playbook. What does the new playbook look like? When the dust settles, you're a guy that's lived through so much change. We met at Deer Valley, 2001. I guess it was right after 9/11. That's when we became friends for the first time. We've seen so much change. We've seen that new doesn't necessarily replace old. Where do you see it all settling when all is said and done in terms of life, in terms of work, in terms of media? It's a massive question, I know, but if I ask the question and then I just let you talk, then it's much better under these circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know, and there are days where I'm optimistic and there's days where I'm pessimistic. And so for me, I'm just trying to marinate in it. And as Tom said, the pendulum swings back. I just don't know where it swings all the way back to. I think it's going to be, depending on how protracted this situation is. And again, I don't think we have a good answer. Like if there's a vaccine, maybe it's all over way quicker than we thought it was. And then I think that affords the ability for the pendulum to snap back even quicker. But I think the more time we spend in this, and it's hard to answer because we cut across so much demographics in the people that we work with and work for. But as you get used to the work-life balance that this sort of presents itself, I think there are elements that will be hard to ignore and say, I'm going to go back to the 6:15 train in the morning, the 7:30 train at night, and that's my norm. I think we're going to have to expect an environment that has more balance, but maybe in exchange for that balance, there's greater accountability when you're expected to be in the office and greater productivity. For us, it means parts of our business that were ingrained in legacy that we're very focused on bringing forward and making change that sort of contemporizes the platform. And so you could think about that in the context of a legacy order management system as opposed to a cloud-based one. Yes, the pendulum will swing back, but if I'm running my sales team and we're at a 105 of our budget, no one's going to want to make fundamental change in that environment, because you don't want to go from a 105 to a 99 because you've decided to drive sort of foundational change. So, we're leaning into some big change now, because from a revenue perspective, you threw the playbook out the window. Of course, you want to optimize your performance as best as you can in this environment, but there are a lot of question marks. So when I think about what it looks like for our organization, the first thing I think about is what does that work-life balance look like? What does that 5-day work week look like? You're back. Have you been arrested?
Listen, as long as people, no, all I'm doing is driving. I'm reversing, going forward, reversing in a parking lot. So I'm not like driving while under the influence of Corona TV.
I love it. That should be its own show. But I'm thinking about sort of that work-life balance in the context of everything that wraps around our environment. And then I'm just thinking about the evolutions of roles as it relates to legacy versus contemporary. And, are the names we put on things, are the expectations that we put on roles, are those things that we can use the time that we've had to sort of accelerate some of those changes. And I don't want to get overly specific because I'm not exactly sure what that looks like, but I am thinking about the breadth of sort of, I have 650, 700 people working for me, and they have very, very different jobs, and evolving those people and what they do and what their roles is and what their missions are and what their expectations are in the context of this new environment is the stuff I'm thinking about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And obviously I just flashed up the comment from Tom as well. Here's the thing. You've always been a considered and a considerate person. You've always been, that was probably why we became friends at the beginning, and why we connected. And I think the touch that will be required moving forward will be a considered and a considerate touch, where people like you will be able to find the balance between the old and the new, to find where that pendulum needs to settle at the end of the day. And and I think if ever we've needed to witness this as a human race, it is the fact that extremes never work. We're living through it right now. And truth be told, we've lived through it even politically in this country for the last several elections. What is required now is not vanilla or being in the middle. What's required is equilibrium and balance. And I think that people, it's funny because when you live in a bunker, whether it's our home, whether the lights go out or they don't, to use this analogy, there can be literally trees falling all around you. And if you don't venture outside and if you don't open your eyes, you don't even see that devastation. But then the dust settles, the sun comes out, and people start to rebuild. And that's why, in many respects, I think you're in the right place at the right time right now, or at least, for all those people working for you, they couldn't be working for a better guy. That's a little bit of a birthday wish or greeting for you.
I'd like you to put that on a T-shirt for me for my birthday. I will wear it proudly. I appreciate that. I mean, look, it is a tricky time, and I think the thing that can be wearing about this is that it does oftentimes feel like we're running a marathon and we don't know where the finish line is. And so, we might be delighted that it's, a 16-mile marathon and we finished in 2/3 the time, but it could be considerably longer. And so in either event, you have to pace yourself, because if you're racing for a 2/3 marathon and it's twice as long, you're in a lot of trouble. And so I think our own personal equilibrium and balance is really important in all this as well, and not to get too spun up or too spun down by anything that you can control and that's going on. And so that's took me probably 3 weeks of the pandemic to figure out that I wasn't going to sweat all the small stuff and just sort of let it happen and be on the balls of my feet. And I think that's ultimately served me pretty well. It's at least helped me sleep at night.
Well, there is 7% left on my battery if I didn't have enough issues to worry about. But I want to make sure that people know that if they need wine and beer and Corona right now, the beer, please go to David Johnson's wine store at dandywineandspirits.com, the proud sponsor of Corona TV. And Nick, I know you have a real plug and a real, but why don't you hopefully do this very quickly before the battery goes up, but talk a little bit about the wonderful Tom and the TD Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, look, you all know Tom Dearline. He's an amazing guy with an amazing story. And as an amazing guy, an amazing story he is, he's created with help from people like Paul Bremer and Sean Finnegan and Bill Flatley, an amazing organization that is really focused on helping Gold Star families that are in need of things from as little as a donation for school supplies to as big as donation to help with life-saving surgery or in some cases to pay for the funeral of a lost one. And it's an amazing organization. It delivers big and small wins every single day. And it's something in this environment, I think more so than ever, is absolutely critical to these families that have given themselves for our country. And now Tom Dearline and the TD Foundation is able to support them in their lives when they need it the most. And so, I'm proud to be on the board of advisors and a friend to Tom. And if you don't know about them, I would encourage you to get to know them. And when you have a chance, participate in one of their events, because I know you'll feel great in doing so.
Well, this has been Nick, the birthday boy Johnson. Happy birthday, my friend. Head of sales at McClatchey, advisor, and one of the true digital OGs and one of the nicest guys, one of the original nice guys. We're going to end the broadcast so I don't lose this. I hope this was good enough for you, Nick. I wanted to make sure that we did this specifically on your birthday. It's a memorable one, as all encounters between us have been memorable. So happy birthday, my friend.
Thank you very much. I would have it no other way than spending some time with you in the most unusual of circumstances. So I appreciate all of it.
No doubt. Take care, everyone.